The Gospel of St. Mark, the 2nd chapter. After a few days, he entered into Capernaum again, and it was noised that he was in a house. And anon many gathered together, insomuch that now there was no room to receive them, no, not in places about the door. And he preached unto them. And there came unto him men, bringing one sick of the palsie, borne of 4. And because they could not come near unto him for press, they opened the roof of the house where he was. And when they had broken it open, they let down the bed wherein the sick of the palsie lay. When Jesus saw their faith, he said to the sick of the palsie, Son, thy sins are forgiven thee. There were certain of the scribes sitting, and reasoning in their hearts, How doth this fellow so blaspheme? Who can forgive sins, but God only? And immediately, when Jesus perceived in his spirit that they so reasoned within themselves, he said unto them, Why think ye such things in your hearts? Whether is it easier to say to the sick of the palsie, Thy sins are forgiven thee, or to say, Arise, take up thy bed, and walk? But that ye may know that the Son of Man hath power on earth to forgive sins, he spake unto the sick of the palsie, I say unto thee, Arise, take up thy bed, and get thee hence into thine own house. And by he arose, took up his bed, and went forth before them all, insomuch that they were all amazed, and glorified God, saying, We never saw it on this fashion. And he went out again unto the sea, and all the people resorted unto him, and he taught them. And as Jesus passed by, he saw Levi the son of Alphaeus sitting at the receipt of custom, and said unto him, Follow me. And he arose and followed him. And it came to pass, as Jesus sat at meat in his house, many publicans and sinners sat at meat also with Jesus and his disciples. For there were many that followed him. And when the scribes and Pharisees saw him eat with publicans and sinners, they said unto his disciples, How is it that he eateth and drinketh with publicans and sinners? When Jesus heard that, he said unto them, The whole have no need of the physician, but the sick. I came to call sinners to repentance, and not the just. And the disciples of John and of the Pharisees did fast. And they came and said unto him, Why do the disciples of John and of the Pharisees fast, and thy disciples fast not? And Jesus said unto them, Can the children of a wedding fast while the bridegroom is with them? As long as they have the bridegroom with them, they cannot fast. But the days will come when the bridegroom shall be taken from them, and then shall they fast in those days. Also, no man seweth a piece of new cloth unto an old garment, for then taketh he away the new piece from the old, and so is the rent worse. In like wise, no man poureth new wine into old vessels, for if he do, the new wine breaketh the vessels, and the wine runneth out, and the vessels are marred. But new wine must be poured into new vessels. And it chanced that he went through the cornfields on the Sabbath day, and his disciples, as they went on their way, began to pluck the ears of corn. And the Pharisees said unto him, Take heed, why do they on the Sabbath day that which is unlawful? And he said to them, Have ye never read what David did, when he had need and was an hungered, both he and they that were with him? How they went into the house of God in the days of Abiathar the high priest, and ate the hallowed loaves, which it is not lawful but for the priests only to eat, and gave also to them which were with him. And he said to them, The Sabbath day was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. Wherefore, the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath.
It occurs to me that since this translation is nearly 500 years old, 5 centuries, it might itself need some translation, as word meanings gradually shift over time. Some conventions that were common in Tyndale's time have since passed away, and indeed, there are movements today seeking to hasten their disappearance. Grammatically, it is important to understand distinctions such as thee and thine versus you and your, as well as the eth suffix used for verbs. Additionally, Tyndale's English follows a formal structure that differs from today's usage. In early modern English, pronouns and verb conjugations function differently than they do today. Understanding these distinctions enhances our ability to comprehend texts from that period. The pronouns thou, thee, thy, and thine were used for the second person singular. Thou was the subject, as in thou art kind, while thee was the object, as in my love thee. Thy and thine indicated possession, with thy used before words beginning with a consonant, such as thy book, and thine before words starting with a vowel sound, as in thine apple, or as a possessive pronoun, as in this book is thine. The pronouns ye and you function differently, with ye originally serving as the subject for the second person plural, as in ye are welcome, while you was its object form, as in I greet you. Over time, you replaced both thou and ye, eventually becoming the standard pronoun for both singular and plural. Originally, thou and thee were used in informal or intimate contexts, addressing close friends, family members, or individuals of lower social status. Conversely, you and ye were formal pronouns, used to convey respect or to address multiple people. By the 17th century, thou had mostly fallen out of use, and you became the universal pronoun in both singular and plural contexts, regardless of formality. Verb conjugation in early modern English also differed. The third-person singular present tense of verbs often ended with eth. For example, he mocketh means he makes, and she runneth translates to she runs. Over time, this suffix was replaced by the modern s ending. The second-person singular present tense verbs typically ended with est. For example, thou makest means you make, and thou knowest translates to you know. This form gradually faded as thou disappeared from common speech. These grammatical structures appear in works such as Tyndale's Bible translation and Shakespeare's plays. Recognizing these patterns helps us better understand the nuances of early modern English. Because of these linguistic differences, I've decided to include a brief explanation at the end of each chapter, defining words that might cause difficulty, clarifying expressions that may be obscure, and providing a little insight into the English grammar of the time. For example, in this chapter, we encounter words like noysed, which means that something was spread by word of mouth, anone, meaning immediately, and insomuch, which means to such an extent. The word palsie refers to a condition causing paralysis or uncontrollable shaking, while press in this context does not mean the media, but rather a crowd or a multitude. The scribes were Jewish scholars who copied and interpreted the law, and the Pharisees were a religious group known for their strict adherence to the law. When Jesus told the man he healed to get thee hence, he meant go away from here. When the people witnessed the miracle, they said, we never saw it on this fashion, which simply means they had never seen anything like it before. Other words refer to specific cultural or religious concepts. Resorted means that people gathered together in one place. Sat at meat means to sit and eat a meal. In Tyndale's time, meat referred to food in general, whereas today, it usually refers only to animal flesh. Publicans were tax collectors for the Roman government, often seen as corrupt and despised by fellow Jews. Disciples were followers or students of a teacher. It chanced means something happened by occurrence. When Jesus and his disciples walked through the cornfields, it is important to note that this does not refer to maize, which was unknown in Europe at the time. Instead, it refers to a field of grain, such as wheat or barley. We also encounter terms rooted in ancient Jewish practice. The hallowed loaves, also called showbread, were sacred loaves reserved for the priests in the temple. Sabbath, from the Hebrew Shabbat, means rest or ceasing and refers to the Jewish day of rest, observed on the seventh day. When Jesus says, the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath, he reminds his listeners that God's laws were meant to serve humanity, not to burden them. Some words in this chapter were borrowed directly from Greek, Hebrew, or Latin rather than being fully translated into English. The word gospel comes from the Greek euangelion, meaning good news. Baptize comes from baptizo, meaning to immerse or dip. Scribe comes from the Latin scriba, meaning one who writes or records. Pharisee comes from the Hebrew parish, meaning separated one. Publican comes from the Latin publicanus, referring to a tax collector. Sabbath comes from the Hebrew Shabbat, meaning rest, and physician comes from the Greek iatros, meaning healer. Language evolves over time, and even though Tyndale's translation is still readable, some words and expressions require explanation. I hope these definitions and etymology dives help you better understand the text and the richness of its language. If you found this helpful, let me know in the comments. Like, subscribe, and pray for this work, that it may reach all seekers of truth.